The Secret of Self-Made Billionaires by Sviokla and Mike Cohen. Every empire begins with a moment of frustration, like for Dietrich Mateschitz. It was when he stood in a hotel bar, a glass of bland orange juice in his hand, looking around at the gray suits, the gray men, and a life that was turning grayer by the day. He was the marketing director for a toothpaste company, traveling the world to talk about the benefits of fluoride, a stable, high-paying job with business-class flights and nights in luxurious hotel rooms. But at that very moment, he felt like he was slowly dying. Then, on a routine trip to Thailand, he stumbled upon a local energy drink, a thick, sweet liquid like cough syrup, but as invigorating as if someone had pressed the reset button on his brain. The next day, he read a newspaper and discovered that the company producing this drink was one of Japan's highest taxpayers. There was nothing futuristic about it, just a mundane product in a niche market generating extraordinary profits. It wasn't an inspiration, it was a slap in the face. He returned to Europe, quit his job, and with a Thai man, Chalio Uvidya, founded Red Bull. Not because he had a mission, but because he couldn't bear to live another 10 years exactly like the past 10. It was a rejection of a copy of himself. He didn't call himself a producer, but Sviokla and Mike Cohen do. According to them, producers are rare individuals who aren't stuck choosing between being a dreamer or an executor. They live where these two worlds intersect. They both imagine and build, empathize with users, and understand market dynamics. However, the corporate world isn't designed for them. Modern organizations are built for implementers, people who achieve goals on time, to spec, and within KPIs. They are polished links, running smoothly in a large machine. But producers are not links. They are the ones who see the machine could operate differently. The problem is, most companies don't want to see things differently, especially from within. Sviokla and Cohen's research team conducted a systematic survey of over 800 self-made billionaires globally. The first thing that surprised them was that most of these individuals had worked in large organizations before starting their own ventures. This means corporations once possessed the raw material for breakthrough innovation but failed to recognize it. These individuals were rejected, forced to leave, or ignored. And then, outside, they created Apple, Lululemon, Spanx, Red Bull. In other words, the system itself expelled its most valuable elements. Why? Because producers don't fit linear thinking. You're good at this, specialize in it. They, however, see everything as a network interconnected, integrated, imaginative, critical. They aren't excellent at one specific thing, but they see the potential for intersection between fields, and it is at these intersections that new value is created. They don't need to be in blue oceans, unexplored new markets. In fact, over 80% of self-made billionaires got rich in saturated, highly competitive markets. They didn't invent new fields, they reshaped how those industries operate. Red Bull didn't invent energy drinks. They just gave it a different can, a different story, a different price point. Lululemon didn't invent yoga, they simply made yoga pants a symbol of a lifestyle. Spanx didn't invent hosiery, they just cut off the feet and made it a revolution for women. You might think it's luck, but over 90% of them had failed, worked at multiple companies, lost money, and still came back. Luck isn't that persistent. You might think it's innate talent, but data shows that most of them trained for years in sales, accounting, consulting, even manual labor to develop their feel for the market and people. You might think they are lone geniuses. In reality, the most successful producers always have a strong implementer by their side. Jobs had Wozniak, Gates had Allen, Zuckerberg had Sandberg, Resnick had Stuart Resnick. Dreamers need doers, and vice versa. So what truly makes them different? Sviokla and Cohen present 5 paradoxical pairs that producers not only reconcile but masterfully live with. 1. Imaginative empathy. Asterisk, they don't just imagine randomly. They feel the pain, the needs, the unspoken desires of users, then imagine solutions. 2. Urgent patience. Asterisk, they can wait for years, even decades, but not in silence. They prepare, build foundations, explore, and when the moment arrives, they act immediately without a second's hesitation. 3. Creative execution. Asterisk, they don't separate thinking from doing. They operate instinctively, through experimentation, through immediate adjustment, not through rigid processes. 4. Relative view of risk. Asterisk, they aren't afraid of loss, they're afraid of not doing. The greatest risk for them is being left behind by an idea they didn't pursue. 5. Collaborative leadership. Asterisk, they don't need to be the center. They need a team diverse enough to complement each other. They believe value lies not in ego, but in synergy. This integrated mindset doesn't come from genes. It comes from an urge to not accept the world as it is and not to wait for someone else to change it. What makes this research important is that it doesn't romanticize difference. Instead, it shows that this difference can be identified, nurtured, and operated within an organization if leaders are willing to change how they perceive talent. Many companies today, when faced with rapidly changing markets, tighten their processes, measure meticulously, and seek certainty. What they don't realize is that the more they optimize what exists, the further they drift from what could exist. Potential producers within the organization, those with unconventional ideas who ask more questions than they answer or do things their own way, are often seen as troublesome. Yet they are the only hope for innovation. And even if one can't become a producer, every implementer can learn something from this mindset. Ask different questions, dare to imagine differently, try a different approach. Move personnel within the organization from the implementer extreme closer to the producer side, not so that everyone becomes a disruptor, but so the organization can accommodate more of those who can be. Because if not, you'll only be left with people who are good at doing the old things. In a world that always needs something new, some ideas arrive like a bolt from the blue. But if we look closely, behind that lightning bolt is a parched field that has been waiting for fire for a very long time. When Joe Mansueto sat amidst knee-high prospectuses in his one-bedroom apartment, he wasn't planning a revolution. He just wanted to understand the mutual funds he was pouring money into. But then, amidst the smell of ink and monotonous rustle of paper, an idea emerged. If someone could help synthesize all this into an understandable, systematic summary, every small investor would save hundreds of hours. He didn't know that this tiny thought, "I could start a business doing this," would lead to an empire called Morningstar, completely changing how Americans, and then the world, accessed financial information. But to understand why a simple idea can turn into billions, we must look at the internal map of producers, the way they see the world, feel the world, and imagine what the world will become. John Sviokla and Mike Cohen call it imaginative empathy ***, imagination and empathy, a pair often considered to be opposites. Dreamers are often thought to be detached from reality. Those who are too empathetic can easily be limited by others' pain. But for producers, these two elements don't conflict. They elevate each other. They can both feel what others lack and dare to envision something no one has ever thought of. Like Chip Wilson, the founder of Lululemon. When he saw his yoga class grow from 6 people to 30 in just 1 month, he didn't simply think it was a trend. He remembered thousands of hours sitting by his mother's sewing machine, countless times surfing in self-made shorts, the baggy pants he sold in Europe and Japan before. He didn't see yoga as just yoga. He saw it as a gateway to something no one had named. Premium athletic wear, combining utility with lifestyle, something that makes people both sweat and take photos for social media. He didn't survey the market or conduct focus groups. He just observed, felt, imagined, and acted. Similarly, there's the story of Jeffrey Lurie, owner of the Philadelphia Eagles. From an Oscar-winning film producer, he pivoted to buying a declining football team. Everyone thought he was crazy. Financial magazines scoffed at him for spending too much. He himself had moments of doubt when he saw mice running around his windowless office. But Lurie didn't buy a football team. He bought an investment in the sports entertainment industry, where he knew it would be the next major current in television, media, and mass emotion. Buying a team is a financial act, but feeling that football would be the new reality TV, that's empathy and imagination operating simultaneously. In all examples, what stands out is that producers don't see the market as a map, but as a living, moving organism. They don't seek a destination, they tune into the flow. And what's special is that they don't wait for the perfect moment to act. When Sarah Blakely created Spanx, she had to call hundreds of textile factories. All of them refused. She had no technical drawings, no investment capital, no one backing her. Just a pair of cut-off pantyhose and a belief that women wanted shapewear that wouldn't show lines. When a factory owner asked his teenage daughters for their opinion, they said, "We want those kinds of pants." So he changed his mind. Sarah didn't succeed because she had a grand idea. She succeeded because she recognized a lack that no one else noticed and dared to give it form. So where do these ideas come from? Sviokla and Cohen found that most billion-dollar ideas don't come from a sudden epiphany. They come from accumulation, from observation, from doing something repeatedly until something feels wrong. In other words, imagination doesn't spring from thin air. It grows from the soil of experience. Over 75% of self-made billionaires have direct sales experience. Nearly 70% ran a small business before the age of 30. Nearly 30% started before the age of 22. They aren't people who sit around waiting for ideas. They live in the trenches, interacting with the market, getting feedback, facing rejection, and trying again. Their imagination isn't a biological trait, it's a consequence of friction with life. But experience alone isn't enough. They also have something else, curiosity ***. Mark Cuban, founder of Broadcastcom, recounts his childhood fascination with stamps and baseball cards. He didn't just collect, he memorized the value of each item. He learned to resell. He calculated profits before even reaching middle school. That habit researching, analyzing, comparing, trading stayed with him his whole life. Later, when he founded Micro Solutions and Broadcastcom, he still made a habit of reading hundreds of documents each week. Curiosity isn't a virtue, it's a relentless engine. They also read a lot, but not just what they're familiar with, they read widely, deeply, to break old frameworks. Steve Jobs studied at Reed College, a liberal arts school that encourages interdisciplinary thinking. Jack Ma used to ride his bike to a hotel every morning to practice English with tourists. He wasn't just learning a language, he was learning how Westerners think, and he transformed that into the foundation of Alibaba. Finally, there's an often overlooked factor: empathy not just for the present, but for the future. Su Lianji, founder of Hengen International in China, didn't start with a macro idea. He was just a farmer, then made zippers, then garments, then tissues. When he learned about sanitary napkins, he didn't just see a product with demand. He saw it as a hygienic, cultural, psychological issue that large brands like P&G weren't addressing because they targeted wealthy urbanites. Su Lianji targeted rural women. He understood what they would need. Then, step by step, he improved quality, expanded to baby diapers and tissues, and even beat foreign competitors. Su Lianji's ability didn't lie in patents. It lay in his vision to empathize with the voiceless and imagine what would happen if they were served properly. After surveying all these examples, one thing becomes clear. Producers don't just come up with new ideas, they redefine industry boundaries. They don't improve products, they recreate expectations. Glenn Taylor, a print shop employee, saw that weddings didn't just need invitations, they were an experience. And if you captured the starting point, the invitation, you could suggest subsequent accessories, hand towels, menus, keepsakes. All could be personalized. When he redesigned printing machines to print hand towels in a single operation, he wasn't inventing technology. He was doing something no one in the industry saw as necessary because they were still thinking inside the box. Imagine with your feet in the mud. Empathize with eyes fixed on the horizon. And act when both can still coordinate. There's a paradox that haunts all change makers. If you act too soon, the market won't understand you. If you're too slow, the market won't need you anymore. Standing between these two extremes is a rare art, knowing when to be patient and when to charge forward regardless. In the investment world, people often talk about timing. But producers don't wait for the right time, they prepare as if the moment is always about to arrive. And when an opportunity opens, even if it's just a crack, they rush in as if they've trained their whole lives for that leap. It sounds contradictory, but it's not. Take Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, the first women's shapewear company to go public. She didn't rush into the market as soon as she had the idea. She spent years learning how to file patents, design packaging, and persuade factories to manufacture, all while working full-time and not breathing a word to anyone. That's patience. But as soon as she received the first positive feedback from a test customer, she accelerated, calling every major retail chain. When Neiman Marcus agreed to meet, she flew there immediately, even bringing white pants to prove Spanx wouldn't leave a visible line. She didn't wait for the market, she steered into the moment. Similarly, with Steve Case of AOL. Steve Case wasn't the first to think of connecting the public to the internet, but for nearly a decade, he led the company through countless contracts with IBM, Apple, and sent millions of CDs to users. Even though revenue was unstable, people thought he was slow, but in reality, he was steadfast. And when the internet exploded in the mid-90s, AOL had the infrastructure, customers, and brand, becoming one of the largest IPOs in history. Producers don't act slowly, they prepare extensively. Sviokla and Cohen found that over 60% of self-made billionaires had a prolonged quiet period where they accumulated skills, knowledge, and built networks, even if no one saw them doing anything grand. Like Michael Bloomberg, after being fired from Salomon Bros, he spent years developing statistical software for banks, something his former colleagues dismissed as a toy. But when banks needed real-time data, Bloomberg was ready. His breakthrough wasn't random, it was a rocket waiting to launch. And this is what differentiates producers from dreamers. Dreamers think patience is sitting and waiting. Producers understand that patience is working when no one is watching. It's when you learn another language, hone a skill, read about a field outside your expertise, simply because you believe it will one day be necessary. Conversely, a producer's urgency isn't haste. It's an instant reflex honed through thousands of observations of the flow. They have an internal sensor, a delicate radar to recognize when the market's heartbeat changes. Consider how Glenn Taylor, the owner of a printing empire, ventured into printing custom napkins for weddings. Initially, he just noticed a customer asking for 100 cloth napkins, but instead of treating it as an odd request, he realized that in a world where everything was industrialized, people began to crave personalized items. He developed technology for fast, small-batch printing and then expanded to other products. Taylor didn't have a detailed long-term plan. He just acted at the right time, but only because he had observed correctly for long enough. The remarkable thing is that producers don't demand the world change for them. They change to catch up with the world before it realizes it needs them. And to do that, they must live with daily contradictions: when to be rigid, when to be flexible, when to say, we need more data, when to say, just do it, when to step back and observe, when to charge forward and seize opportunity. The answer is, they don't have fixed rules. They have an intuition forged from real-world friction, from mistakes, from acting at the wrong time, failing to learn what's right. One of the most shocking examples is George Soros. He isn't a producer in the technology sense, but he reads financial flows like an artist reads a musical score. When he saw the Bank of England artificially pegging its exchange rate to the German mark, he knew it was unsustainable. He waited, watched, accumulated. Then one day, he placed a $10 billion bet against the British pound and became the man who broke the Bank of England. That was urgency after a rock-solid patience. But not everyone is suited for this kind of timing, because preparation earns no praise, while action is always judged if it fails. Producers must endure periods that seem unproductive when no one sees the value in what they're doing. And that is the real challenge. Organizations often aren't patient with those who are patient. They want results, they want reports, they want actions following protocol. But producers operate on a different logic: feel, react, create value chains unannounced. This makes companies susceptible to losing individuals who are silently preparing for the next leap, simply because they haven't delivered clear results. Sviokla and Cohen call this the organizational blind spot. It occurs when an organization only sees those who run fast, but not those who are bracing themselves at the starting line. To cure this blind spot, organizations need to change how they value things, not just looking at output, but observing behavior patterns. Who is learning something no one assigned them? Who is asking self-generated questions? Who is connecting seemingly unrelated pieces? Those are the signals of a producer nurturing a seed, and if you don't see them, someone else will. Non-linear, non-sequential, non-uniform. The producer's timeline is a strange mixture of quiet and breakthrough, of prolonged silence and sudden action. Like underground currents beneath ice, you don't know they're flowing until a part of the lake's surface shatters. One of the biggest misconceptions about producers is that they can't manage. They're great at creating but poor at maintaining. They're fire starters, not fire keepers. This thinking is so prevalent that many organizations assume, let them start, then hand it over to someone else to run. but the truth is often less convenient than prejudice. Those who create billion-dollar value often don't hand over their ideas. They continue to run them, but not in the way management books preach. They don't manage by metrics. They manage by feeling. They don't observe from afar. They throw themselves into the system, adjusting every piece, like a conductor who understands both the full score and every single note. Creative execution ** sounds contradictory, managing creatively, executing flexibly. But billionaire producers don't follow that logic. They don't separate the process of thinking and doing. For them, imagining and operating are two halves of a unified process. Imagine a car speeding on a winding mountain road. You're simultaneously the driver, the designer of the steering wheel, and the one attaching auxiliary wheels. That's what it feels like when a producer manages an idea through its growth. Look at Stuart Resnick, the mogul behind seemingly unrelated brands like Wonderful Pistachios and Palm Wonderful. He didn't invent pistachios or fruit juice. He saw them as organisms that needed rebranding. It wasn't just marketing. He rebuilt the entire supply chain, from the growing regions to packaging, from distribution systems to retail points. Everything was treated as a work of art, where efficiency and aesthetics were two sides of the same coin. He didn't manage like a manager. He managed like an artisan. A prominent commonality in Sviokla and Cohen's research is that producers don't transfer ideas to a cookie-cutter operations team. They intervene in every stage, not because they're controlling, but because they understand that if the soul of the idea isn't infused into the operation, what's left is just a husk. This is why they become different, and sometimes annoying, in the eyes of traditional organizations. Organizations want processes. Producers prefer evolving models. Organizations want measurement. Producers want experimentation. Organizations want what's certain. Producers want what's worth trying. Take the example of Michael Bloomberg. When designing the Bloomberg terminal system, he didn't hire a technical team and issue orders. He sat with them, drew every chart, personally adjusted every font, asked every customer if the screen was clear enough. He didn't delegate. He got his hands dirty. Or Sarah Blakely, after her product was sold at Neiman Marcus, she didn't sit around waiting for sales reports. She went to the counter herself, pretending to be a customer, to hear how the sales associates advised, where the product was placed, if it was easy to find, what customers' reactions were. She revised every package, every slogan, every display position. That's not micromanagement. That's creative execution, where every small action has great significance in the overall ecosystem. Interestingly, the best producers often don't have formal management training, but they understand operations at a deep level because they don't view the organization as a machine, but as a living organism. And like all living organisms, it needs dynamic balance, continuous adjustment, constant adaptation, continuous evolution. This is a point many traditional organizations refuse to embrace. They think creation is one phase and operation is another. But producers understand that if you separate these two, you kill both. Imagine opening a restaurant. The idea of the dishes is creative, but if the service is poor, diners won't return. Conversely, if you're only good at operating but your dishes are forgettable, you also fail. What makes a restaurant legendary isn't the chef, nor the manager, but someone who understands that the customer experience is a seamless coordination of both. And this holds true for any product or service available in the market today. In the book, the authors recount the story of a producer who founded a software company. He didn't just write code, he sat with end users, asking about every action. When he saw them needing to click 3 times to complete a task, he didn't tell the design team to optimize the interface. He rewrote the code himself to reduce it to 1 step. He didn't separate himself from the users, he immersed himself. This requires a special ability, maintaining a holistic view while still delving into the details. If a traditional executive is like someone holding binoculars, only observing from afar, a producer is like someone constantly switching between binoculars and a magnifying glass. They look at the overall strategy, then bend down to examine whether every operational detail aligns with the original intention. This is why they dislike hiring external CEOs. They believe no one understands the spirit of an idea as well as the person who conceived it. They are willing to learn how to operate but not willing to let others distort its essence. Because of this, producers often become troublesome figures in large organizations. They don't adhere strictly, they unilaterally adjust the system. They don't write reports in the correct format, they suggest unrequested changes. But it is precisely these unconventional actions that give birth to true innovation. In an internal survey, a producer was once described by a colleague. He disrupts processes, but the strange thing is, after each disruption, the whole team operates more smoothly. Producers don't maintain the system. They mold it into a version that better fits the idea they carry. So what should organizations do? First, stop treating operations as a job reserved solely for implementers. Allow creators to continue holding the wheel, not just in the initial stages, but as the business grows. Second, design more flexible management systems where initiatives can come from any position. Don't encase ideas in too thick a layer of processes, because then, no matter how good they are, they will suffocate. And finally, trust the intuition of the person who understands the product better than anyone. Because sometimes, it's not data that determines whether a product lives or dies, but the instinct of the one who first dared to put their hand to it. They are not reckless. They just don't fear losing like the rest of the world. If you look at how the media talks about self-made billionaires, you'll see a familiar motif. They risk big to win big, they bet everything, they dare to play large. Producers don't seek risk, they redesign it. From the beginning, Sviokla and Cohen doubted the popular interpretation of success. In their research of over 800 self-made billionaires, they noticed one point. Most of these people didn't make decisions by flipping a coin. They acted as if they knew what would happen. Not because they had prophetic abilities, but because they understood the nature of risk. The average person's perception of risk. Imagine standing before a cliff. Most people would stop or turn another way. Producers examine the incline, the wind force, the grip of their shoes, the angle of the light, then climb. Not because they're braver, but because they see more clearly. Take Sarah Blakely as an example. Before founding Spanx, she sold fax machines door to door. Every day she was rejected dozens of times, but with each knock on the door, she learned to read emotions, to articulate benefits, to respond instinctively. When she switched to selling Spanx, she didn't see it as a risk. For her, it was just another product to introduce. Sarah didn't quit her job to pursue a dream. She saved $5,000, working day and night for 2 years. When the product launched, she still kept her main job. Her risk wasn't losing everything, but losing the opportunity if she did nothing. That's one of the fundamental points for producers. The biggest risk isn't failure, it's not trying. And that, not trying, is what keeps them awake at night. Look at George Soros. When he bet on the collapse of the British pound, everyone said he was crazy. But he had been observing the signs for years: monetary policy, fixed exchange rates, inflation differentials. He didn't gamble. He acted when he realized that if he didn't do it immediately, the opportunity would disappear. And that was the real risk. Or take Steve Case leading AOL. He understood that the mass internet was far from becoming a reality, but he knew that if he wasn't there from the beginning, when the market truly exploded, he would be left behind. He wasn't betting on the success of the internet. He was betting on himself, on his ability to adjust, learn, and adapt. That's a key difference. Risk-takers often bet on hope. Producers act on understanding, plus a bit of instinct honed over time. Sviokla and Cohen found that the best producers don't wait for enough information, but they also don't act blindly. They accumulate small data, observe details, test in the field. They don't ask, "Is it certain?" They ask, "Do I understand enough to take the next step?" And enough is never absolute. They accept the blind spots but master the clear parts. Part of the reason they see risk differently than others is their different starting point. Most self-made billionaires in the study grew up in middle-class environments. They weren't rich, but they weren't so poor as to fear loss. They learned 2 things at once: stability is real and it's not permanent, so they don't deify safety. They understand that every system has breaking points, even stability. That's why they aren't paralyzed by fear. A memorable story is that of Kevin Plank, the founder of Under Armour. He was a college football player, always frustrated with sweat-soaked shirts. After graduating, he started experimenting with moisture-wicking shirts from his grandmother's basement. Initial budget, a few $1,000s. Equipment, a borrowed sewing machine. The first time he went to a retail store, he was rejected. But he went back, changed designs, tried materials, sent shirts to athlete friends. A little bit at a time, each time understanding more about what people truly needed. When large sports chains realized Under Armour was something different, Plank was already years ahead, even though hardly anyone remembered his name when he started. The risk wasn't in failing, the risk was in being late. For producers, risk isn't an objective phenomenon, it's a relative state dependent on the level of preparation, tolerance, and long-term vision. They don't avoid risk, they reshape their relationship with it. And there's a tool they use extremely effectively: controlling the scope of risk ***. Instead of betting everything, they break it down, they experiment, they prototype, they test the market, they design bearable risks. That sounds normal, but in startup reality, very few people manage to do it. Most fail because they burn too much money on something unproven. Producers, however, do the opposite: prove it as early, as small, as real as possible. For example, Linda Resnick didn't pour money into advertising Palm Wonderful from the start. She tested every bottle design, tried prices in different cities, monitored customer reactions. When she saw the data steadily rising, she accelerated. And if risk is unavoidable, producers have another skill: extremely fast recovery ***. They don't dwell on failure, they learn from it and move on. When a product doesn't sell, they ask, who didn't buy? Why? Was any detail misunderstood? Was the positioning unclear? Not self-questioning like, am I stupid? But where is the bottleneck? This calmness isn't empty, inspirational positivity. It's a survival habit. The real risk for producers doesn't come from outside. It comes from within, when they start to doubt their ability to see what others haven't seen. Therefore, protecting their vision, their sensitivity to trends, their curiosity about the future, their decisiveness with opportunities, is how they protect themselves from the most terrifying risk: becoming ordinary. There's a quiet paradox in the world of disruptors. They always stand at the center of change, but they never operate alone. The media often portrays founders as eccentric, solitary individuals with oversized visions. The reality is different. Behind every great business turning point is a complex web of relationships, where leaders know that the greatest power lies not in control, but in the ability to make others believe, act, and commit. Collaborative leadership ***. Producers are not like traditional leaders who rely on hierarchy, titles, and formal authority. They lead by transmitting energy, no commands, no strictures, but creating an attraction that makes others willingly join. Take Steve Jobs as an example. He wasn't easygoing. He wasn't kind in the usual sense, but he had the ability to make others see what they never believed was possible. He didn't manage the design team, he instilled in them an unreasonably high standard, and somehow they committed to it more than he did. Top Apple engineers once said, "We work 80 hours a week not because we're forced, but because we see what we're doing is worthwhile." That's not management, that's influence. Sviokla and Cohen call this a form of leadership that comes from the ability to flow into the team, into the organization, into the moment, without losing personal identity. Imagine someone parachuting into a project team. They don't shout. They don't present a long-term vision. They get to work, share information, fix every bug, and then suddenly the whole team moves faster. No one is commanding, but the direction is clear. That's a producer. And that kind of leadership requires 3 elements: understanding others, practical humility, and clarity about core values. Understanding others is not about pleasing them, but about knowing what to say, what to do, and when. Producers don't try to please. They observe, listen, and adjust their message to hit the right hot buttons in the other person's mind. They don't sell ideas like a multi-level marketer. They recount the problem in the language of those suffering from it, and then offer a solution as if it's the only way out. Practical humility ** means knowing you can't do everything, understand everything, or be right about everything. Not a feigned humility, but a very clear realization that all success is collaborative. The best producers are those who know how to put better people in the right positions. Look at Mark Zuckerberg. You might not like him, but right after Facebook started growing, the first thing he did was find experienced operators and didn't hesitate to invite a strong-minded person like Sheryl Sandberg. That was a conscious decision about power, sharing to multiply it. Finally, ** clarity about core values **. Producers are not lax with their ideas. They are firm where firmness is needed, the soul of the product, the core experience, what makes them different. This very firmness helps them not dissolve into the crowd. They listen, adjust, collaborate, but do not abandon their essence. The collaboration they build is not, "we are family," a phrase companies often use to justify overtime. It's a strategic alliance where everyone clearly sees what they gain, what they lose, and how far they are committed. The authors tell an interesting story. A good producer can make an entire engineering team work overtime for 3 months just for a small change in the product if they feel it's truly important. And that only happens if the leader is truly present with them every step of the way. Being present isn't just being in the meeting room, but at lunch, in the product testing room, when everyone is thinking of giving up. This is why producers often don't build teams, they build centers of influence. They don't try to create a top-down company culture. They let energy radiate from how they act, make decisions, and respond. And that energy has a strange quality. It's contagious. A decisive and fair person will make the team more committed. A creative person who also listens will make the entire organization more agile. No need for a cultural manifesto, just consistent presence. A producer's collaboration isn't limited to inside the company. It extends to customers, suppliers, investors. Look at how Linda Risnick worked with the farmers who supplied fruit for Palm. She didn't just buy raw materials. She shared consumer data, supported new plant varieties, and committed to floor prices. When market prices plummeted, she didn't cut contracts. She found ways to balance. The result: absolute supplier loyalty, stable raw materials, and a brand that maintained its distinctiveness. Or how Glenn Taylor treated his printing team. He didn't hire seasonally. He invested in training, upgraded equipment, even shared profits, because he understood that no one commits to someone else's dream if they don't feel they are living in it. Producers don't create fans, they create companions. And that helps them go further than any exceptional individual. Producers don't need to be the best in the team. They just need to be the ones who maintain the rhythm of the vision. When everything becomes chaotic in an era where organizations are fracturing from within by the conflict between old and new, between control and freedom, between efficiency and creativity, producers are the kind of leaders flexible enough to collaborate, firm enough to maintain identity. And if you're lucky enough to have them in your organization, don't try to force them into a mold. Let them redraw the mold for you. Like every symphony, this book comes to an end not with a bang, but with a silence. A silence long enough for the reader, the leader, the organizational worker to sit back and ask themselves, how many producers have we missed right within our own company? Today's large companies are primarily designed to optimize implementers, not to detect and nurture producers. Systems are built to manage what can be measured, complied with, and repeated, while producers live by intuition, feeling, and breaking the loop. The problem isn't with individuals, the problem is with the structure. Imagine a company with hundreds of people excellent at execution, great at reporting, brilliant at process improvement, yet completely blind to unnamed possibilities, where every unconventional idea is dismissed because there's no market evidence, where initiatives are only judged by spreadsheets, not by long-term vision. That's where producers are eliminated, and the world has witnessed the consequences. Think of Steve Case leaving his old company because no one believed that connecting everyone to the internet was the future. Or Michael Bloomberg was fired from Salomon Bros and went on to build one of the most powerful financial data platforms on the planet. Or Sarah Blakely being rejected hundreds of times simply because no one believed women needed seamless shapewear. If their former companies had understood the mechanisms of producer formation, perhaps they would have retained billions in value. But they didn't. And what about you? How can an organization not only retain producers, but also become a place that nurtures them? First, you must recognize them. They are not noisy. They are not always the highest sales performers. They are often the ones asking strange questions, trying things no one else dares, saying things that make their boss uncomfortable. They don't fit the job description, but they have a special energy. They see the future in things no one currently cares about. Then, you must create space for them to try and fail. Producers do not operate in an environment that only accepts successful outcomes. They need to be allowed to fail small, fail fast, and iterate constantly. If an organization only rewards those who are right from the start, sooner or later, you will only be left with people who never dare to do anything new. Next, connect them with good implementers. As seen throughout the book, producers are not superheroes. They need complementary individuals, people who can actualize their vision. A smart organization is one that knows how to pair them correctly, not letting producers swim alone, nor forcing them into a rigid structure. Then, reevaluate what you consider effective. Traditional KPI systems cannot measure the value that producers create because that value often comes late, takes detours, and is not clear in the short term. Organizations need a system to assess impact creation, the ability to activate ideas, the degree of influence on strategic direction, soft but real metrics. Finally, and most importantly, lead by example asterisk. No one will dare to think differently if the leader only rewards compliance. No one will dare to try if every initiative is stifled at the middle management level. Producers don't demand preferential treatment, but they need to see that the organization truly has room for different ways of thinking. And you don't need to wait until you find someone like Steve Jobs to start changing. You just need to look around you, in the development team, in the marketing department, in the production team. There might be someone quietly trying a new approach. That person isn't demanding a raise, isn't writing thick reports, they're just silently creating something. No matter how small or different, that's the seed of a producer. If you let it die due to lack of light, lack of soil, lack of belief, the loss isn't just a missed idea, but a future you could have reached. The book closes, but the message remains open. Because in this era, where every industry is being overturned, where all old values are shaken, the only thing that helps an organization survive is not optimizing what's known, but nurturing those who dare to see what doesn't yet exist and make it real. Perhaps the strangest thing after going through a book to its final page isn't what we've learned, but what we're compelled to reflect on ourselves. Not with our eyes, but with a feeling. A feeling that perhaps we, too, were once producers who missed the boat, or at least quietly kindled something, then folded it away because the world around us was too loud to hear. If you've listened this far, I know you're not just curious about billionaires. You're searching for a part of yourself in choices yet unnamed. And I want to thank you for not giving up midway. In an era where everything can be scrolled past in 3 seconds, you're staying until the end is an act of weight. If this book has stirred something in you, even just a spark of doubt that you could think differently, act differently, live a little deeper, then it has fulfilled part of its role. And if there's anything that troubles you, that you disagree with or feel isn't enough, please speak up. I'm not looking for nods of agreement, I'm looking for a conversation. Leave a comment, even just a line, a word, to let me know how far you've come on this journey. And if you carry an unresolved question about a book, an author, an idea, don't keep it to yourself, send it to me. Don't think your question isn't interesting enough or deep enough. Life begins with the most trivial curiosities. I don't promise to know everything, but I promise to listen carefully, just as I've listened to you throughout this journey with this book.